5,000 times, and he holds an exceptional H index of 177, a rare level of impact reserved for the most highly cited sciences globally. And also some of his achievements, and I'm just gonna guide you through. He led the neuroimaging element of one of the first generation of functional MRI studies to look at depression and more generally drug effects on brain function, and was the first to propose the use of diffusion-based MRI imaging to detect corticospinal tract damage in motor neuron disease and others, of course. Now, beyond his scientific endeavors, Steve's commitment to global health equity is truly commendable. As the project funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, he oversees the deployment of portable MRI systems that you can see here and here, and probably he's going to show you more later, to 15 sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia countries. Yeah. And now I'm gonna just say a few words about the man, the mentor, and, if I may say so, the friend. As you can see, behind every signature and every paper, there's Steve's personal journey, like this with his wife, the most beautiful moments of life. He's a scientist with a heart and a home, and Ellen, Alfie, and Charlotte must be really proud of you, Steve. Steve is not just a leading academic. He's someone who genuinely cares about his colleagues, his students, their families. One evening out can become a moment of life, far beyond the stereotypes of academic hospitality, and you can see that there is always a joyful child hiding inside Steve, or maybe sometimes behind Steve, actually. Yeah? And my two kids who are here now, a few years ago, and me without a beard, Maria with a haircut. Okay. The most important thing is that Steve's support was never theoretical. I have had the fellow at King's at a time when few were aware of our efforts in Greece, and that's all because of Steve. And his mentorship, his support, and the warmth that he extends to colleagues and students alike have left an indelible mark on my professional journey. Thanks to him, two young researchers from our department, Alekos and Dimitra, where are you? Alekos, Dimitra, yeah, we're here, were also welcomed at King's College with a scholarship, and this image captures a moment of everyday but essential academic presence. So thank you very much. And also, as you can see, Steve and his team participate in our master's program all these years, and thank you very much for their support. Now, Steve is the kind of person who will support your PhD and still ask how your family is doing. He calls you by your first name, values the invincible work of others, and makes everyone around him feel seen. And that's his beloved Heather. And just on a personal note, which is very characteristic about Steve, I still remember one day at the CNS, it was like 10, 15 years ago, Steve. During our orientation, Steve opened the door and proudly revealed this scanner here. And it looked like a fully equipped MRI scanner, but instinctively I stepped back and refused to enter because I thought it was an MRI scanner. After all, you're not supposed to enter into the MR field, and held my ground. And Steve laughed and kept pushing me, saying, okay, yeah, just go on, what about this guy? And eventually said, okay, here's a real scientist, you're not supposed to go into an MRI scanner. But that was a mock scanner. I didn't know what the word meant at the time. Mock, it's a phony, it's a pseutikos. It's only the plastic of the scanner so that you can go in without having the fear of MRI. So this is one of the most authentic version of Steve, holding two beers, always ready to offer not just a drink, but ideas, support, and warmth. Never stopped being human. And couple of last slides. Among his many roles, Steve is a very passionate educator. This is from last year's workshop in Milan that we were together. From King's to Milan, his teaching is more than content, it's vision, it's ethics, it's inspiration. And now I have to well, that was supposed to come later, Vincent. Sorry, it looks like you're a saint, but okay. Yeah. Thanks to Vincent, to you, my last two slides about Steve, so you can really understand who he is. In the early 1990s, Steve was one of the pioneers who started neuroimaging at the IOPPN, then Institute of Psychiatry only, when the department was only 3 people strong. One of the photos here is from a Christmas party 9 years ago, reminding us, Vincent says, reminding the single house capacity, we still think ourselves as one big, if somewhat dysfunctional, family. So here is more at the department, and they have to say that throughout all these years, Steve has always fought for us, defended our interests, and supported our growth. We're all deeply grateful for his leadership, dedication, and the community he helped build. So, ladies and gentlemen, in a city where Hippocrates once taught and was led to rest, in a university striving to merge tradition with innovation, today we honor not just a distinguished scientist, but a compassionate leader who represents exactly that: science with humanity, knowledge with integrity, and teaching with purpose. Thank you very much.
Ακολούθως, η ανάγνωση του ψηφίσματος και της αναγόρευσης, καθώς και η επίδοση των τίτλων και του επιτιβενίου από τον αναπληρωτή πρόεδρο του Τμήματος Ιατρικής, καθηγητή Αριστίδη Ζιμπή.
Η συνέλευση του Τμήματος Ιατρικής κατά την 19η 11 Τετάρτου 25 συνεδρίασή της αποδέχθηκε ομόφωνα το αίτημα του κλινικο-εργαστηριακού τομέα με την πρόταση του κυρίου Χρυσοβαλάντη Ιωάννη Τσούγκου, καθηγητή Ιατρικής Φυσικής, για αναγόρευση του κυρίου Stephen Williams, Professor of Imaging Science, Department of Neuroimaging, Institute of Psychiatry, Psychological and Neuroscience, King's College, London, UK, σε επίτιμο διδάκτορα του Τμήματος Ιατρικής της Σχολής Επιστημών Υγείας του Πανεπιστημίου Θεσσαλίας και αποφάσισε να εκδώσει το παρακάτω ψήφισμα. Στη διάρκεια της θητείας του κυρίου Χαραλάμπου Δημητρίου Μπιλίνη ως πρίτανη του Πανεπιστημίου Θεσσαλίας και του Θεοφίλου Σωτηρίου Καραχάλιου ως Προέδρου του Τμήματος Ιατρικής, μετά από εισήγηση των καθηγητών Χρυσοβαλάντη Ιωάννη Τσούγκου του Μελετίου, Μαριάννας Βλυχού του Κωνσταντίνου, Κυριακής Θεοδόρου του Ιωάννου, Παναγιώτη Γεωργούλια του Αναστασίου, Γεωργίου Κύρια του Μιχαήλ, Χριστάκη Χατζηχριστοδούλου του Σπυρίδωνα, Θεοφίλου Καραχάλιου του Σωτηρίου, Ευτυχίας Καψαλάκη του Ζαχαρία, Αθανασίου Γιαννούκα του Δημητρίου, Ματθαίου Πελέτα του Γεωργίου, Μάριου Μυρονάκη του Εμμανουήλ, Βαρβάρας Βολοτάσιου του Ιωάννη, Παναγιώτη Παπαδημητρούλια του Γεωργίου, Βαρβάρας Μουχτούρη του Αλεξάνδρου, Κωνσταντίνου Τεπετέ του Νικολάου, Εμμανουήλ Παναγιωτίδη του Χρόνη, Κωνσταντίνου Φουντά του Νικολάου, Κωνσταντίνου Πατεράκη του Νικολάου, Αθανασίου Κοτσάκη του Παναγιώτη, Νικολάου Χριστοδούλου του Γεωργίου, Γρηγορίου Γιαμούζη του Δημητρίου, Εμμανουήλ Σαλούστρου του Σταύρου, Ελένης Αρναούτογλου του Μάρκου, Δημητρίου Ζαχαρούλη του Χρήστου, το τμήμα αποφάσισε ομόφωνα ότι ο Professor of Imaging Science, Department of Neuroimaging, Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology and Neuroscience, King College London of UK, Stephen Williams, επειδή υπηρέτησε την επιστήμη της ιατρικής στο εξωτερικό, κατέχει επιφανή θέση μεταξύ των σύγχρονων ερευνητών, αναδείχθηκε σε πρότυπο επιστημονικής σκέψης, διακρίθηκε για το άμεμπτο ήθος και το εύρος της ερευνητικής δραστηριότητας, καλλιέργησε την παιδεία, την διανοητική οξυδέρκεια των ερευνητών της ιατρικής, προήγαγε ποικιλοτρόπως την έρευνα ώστε να ωφεληθούν η ακαδημαϊκή κοινότητα και η κοινωνία, και τέλος απετέλεσε με το λόγο και το έργο του παράδειγμα πολίτη και επιστήμονα, το Τμήμα τον ανακηρύσει επίτιμο διδάκτορά του. Το ψήφισμα αυτό θα αναγραφεί σε μεμβράνη και θα επιδοθεί σε αυτόν την καθορισμένη ημερομηνία που θα γίνει η αναγόρευση, Λάρισα, 11 Απριλίου 2025. Ο πρόεδρος του Τμήματος Ιατρικής, Θεόφιλος Σωτηρίου Καραχάλιους, η γραμματεία του Τμήματος Ιατρικής, Αρετή Νικολάου Κοντογιάννη.
Παρακαλούμε θερμά οι εκλεκτοί καλεσμένοι κατά την ώρα της αναγόρευσης να παραμείνουν όρθιοι στις θέσεις τους ως ένδειξη τιμής προς τον αναγορευόμενο.
Πανεπιστήμιο Θεσσαλίας, αναγόρευση. Επειδή το Τμήμα Ιατρικής της Σχολής Επιστημών Υγείας του Πανεπιστημίου Θεσσαλίας έκρινε άξιο τον Professor of Imaging Science, Department of Neuroimaging, Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology and Neuroscience, King's College London, UK, Stephen Williams, για Διδάκτορα, και επειδή ο Πρίτανης συμφωνεί με την απόφαση του Τμήματος, ο ομιλών Αριστίδης Χρήστου Ζιμπής, καθηγητής Ανατομίας και αναπληρωτής πρόεδρος του Τμήματος Ιατρικής, με την εξουσία του Τμήμα και οι νόμοι του Πανεπιστημίου, αναγορεύω δημόσια τον Professor of Imaging Science, Department of Neuroimaging, Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology and Neuroscience, King College London, UK, Stephen Williams, επίτιμο διδάκτορα της Σχολής Επιστημών Υγείας του Πανεπιστημίου Θεσσαλίας, και το απονέμω όλα τα προνόμια που απορρέουν από αυτό το πανεπιστημιακό αξίωμα. Η αναγόρευση έγινε στη Λάρισα 13 Ιουνίου του έτους 2025, ο αναπληρωτής πρόεδρος του Τμήματος Ιατρικής, Αριστίδης Χρήστου Ζιμπής.
Παρακαλούμε να επιστρέψετε στις θέσεις σας. Εν συνεχεία θα λάβει χώρα η επίδοση των τίτλων και του επιτιβενίου από τον αναπληρωτή πρόεδρο του Τμήματος Ιατρικής. Παρακαλούμε ευγενώς τον κύριο καθηγητή Αριστίδη Ζιμπή να συνοδεύσει τον τιμόμενο καθηγητή Στίβεν Βίλιαμς στο κέντρο της αμφιθεατρικής σκηνής για την τελετή περιένδυσης. Αυτή τη στιγμή ο αναπληρωτής πρόεδρος του Τμήματος Ιατρικής, καθηγητής, ολοκληρώνει την επίσημη τελετή αναγόρευσης. Με μεγαλοπρέπεια επιδίδει στον τιμόμενο τη συμβολική τίβαινο της σχολής. Το επιτιβαίνιο την τιμητική πλακέτα ένα χειροκρότημα παρακαλούμε. Και τους επίσημους τίτλους, αποδίδοντας την αναγνώριση του έργου του καθηγητή Στίβεν Βίλιαμς από το Πανεπιστήμιο Θεσσαλίας. Ένα θερμό χειροκρότημα από όλους. Αξιότιμη κυρία Αντιπρίτανη, κύριε καθηγητές, ευγενώς σας παρακαλούμε να προσέλθετε στην αμφιθεατρική σκηνή για τις αναμνηστικές φωτογραφίες, μία μοναδική μνημείωση της επισήμου αναγόρευσης. Ναι. Αυτή τη στιγμή αποδίδεται το δώρο προς τον τιμόμενο. Η μαγνητική τομογραφία ενσαρκώνει την υπέρβαση των ορίων της ύλης, όπου η επιστήμη με όχημα τη μαγνητική αρμονία και τη διανοητική διάβγεια μετατρέπει το αόρατο σε γνώση και τη γνώση σε ελπίδα. Με την ολοκλήρωση της τελετής, ο τιμόμενος καθηγητής Steven Williams θα εκφωνήσει ομιλία με θέμα πρόσφατες καινοτομίες στην απεικόνιση μαγνητικού συντονισμού. Professor Steven Williams, please. If you need to drink water, it's here.
That's a good idea. Wow. Thank you very much. I experienced every emotion during the last 10 minutes. Embarrassment, pride, a few tears when my family were mentioned, but also thank you for now becoming part of your family. And I'm really honored to be a member of that family, with all your dignitaries, all the students, all shapes and sizes, all walks of life. I still help you, and vice versa in the many years to come. I have about 20 minutes of slides. I promise it's going to be light. I'm not going to go into heavy physics or engineering. But I was asked to give a short presentation on some of my work. And rather than going back almost 40 years, I thought I'd maybe focus on the last 4 or 5 and show a few examples of the work that we've been doing together over that time. So, when people talk about innovation, if you ask the most famous Steve in the world, then Steve Jobs, who was, of course, the man. It's not rocket science. All you have to do is take the customer and ask them what they want, and then you develop and innovate from there. So in the field of medicine, of course, the equivalent of that is to ask our patients. Crazy though it might sound, it's the first time I asked my patients in the last 10 or 15 years was 15 years ago. We had a big meeting, patient engagement, and we said, okay, all of these amazing things that imaging can do, what's wrong with it? And everyone said, flipping machine. Make it quicker, make it more comfortable, and make it even portable, which I thought, okay, this is crazy, this is going a little bit too far. And across the lifespan, whether it's a pregnant mother or an elderly, aging dementia patient. And that set me on a path which was much more focused and clear, because I could see the research for patient benefit almost immediately. So, what is wrong with MRI? I mean, MRI is an amazing technology, it's very safe, it involves radio frequencies and strong magnetic fields, unless it's a mock scanner, like the one Yanis went to. The challenge, of course, is that you're lying inside a loudspeaker. It's strong magnets, electrical wires, pulsing away, and you the MRI machine like a big rock concert if you need to. So we always have complaints and concerns about people lying inside the machine. So what we need to do is to make those so that we can accommodate babies, sleeping subjects, people who are anxious, people who have tinnitus, hearing problems, and of course conditions such as autism, where hypersensitivity to sound is a major concern. That's a barrier to doing leading research. So I was lucky to work with colleagues from General Electric, from Florian Anabeo was a PhD student with us and then became a GE employee, and Florian is an amazing scientist from Austria.
And they developed, in collaboration with our PhD students and postdocs, an amazing range of MRI sequences that are now all silent. So this might work. Okay, it might come on in a second. You might hear sounds of the scanners playing in a second. There we go. That's a normal MRI machine. And that was used to create the images on the top row here. But then, the same hardware, the same technology, the same equipment, but subtly different MR physics, you might just be able to hear a tiny bit, maybe not. All you can hear is the pump. So now scanning, where you can hear the person play sounds, people can hear everything that's going on, and you can make an image that is almost identical to a conventional image. So we're not compromising in any way the image is silent. And I would sincerely hope that by 5 years' time, anybody that's buying a new MRI machine or upgrading their software on their machine should be able to have completely silent imaging for many of their subjects. So we were just one of the pioneering groups, not the only people. You can make this work on many different scanner manufacturers. But it all started because we wanted to make images that looked like CT. An MR scan, we needed to look like a CT because we needed to do some attenuation correction for our PET scans on a PET MR to be able to then not need to have more X-rays and CTs all the time. But that's the long story, but you can now make these beautiful images with this technology as well. So that was silent, trying to make it silent. The next big challenge, of course, is people lying still inside the machine. We have many psychiatric patients with conditions like schizophrenia, and they have no insight of their condition. They don't really know why they're there, but we need to scan them because about 10% of people with psychosis symptoms, like hallucinations, paranoia, and hearing voices, actually have an organic pathology that underlies their conditions. So we need to be able to rule out a tumor in the temporal lobe, for example. So if that subject's not going to lie still, the scan can be very blurred and not diagnostically useful, like the image on the left-hand side. But again, using just the MR physics and the coding and programming of the scanner, you can now make those scanners motion insensitive. So the same subject moving just as much in this scan now allows you to produce a pristine image that is diagnostically useful. That's good on a day-to-day basis for our clinical needs, but you could imagine doing a trial for a new treatment for Alzheimer's, where you might want to scan the same patient over 2 years, scan them every few months to see how their brain is changing, seeing how that brain might atrophy. Now, at the late, they may struggle to lie still. So if you have the motion-insensitive capability, you can still make images which are pristine over that whole time frame, so then you can visualize where the tissue loss has occurred. Because our hope, of course, is to reduce the rate of atrophy in these subjects. Maybe not necessarily reverse the sands of time, but at least slow down the progression of the disease with novel medications that are now in treatment and development. So, a sensitive and robust biomarker, not only to diagnose, but monitor disease progression as well, and hopefully response to treatment. So can you imagine now having a brain scan that's silent and motion? And that's exactly what PhD students who's now working in Sweden did for his Young Investigator Award submission back in 2022. So you can see each quick snapshot in itself is blurred, but you combine all those images and you can make a motion-corrected image even when the person's head is moving. So a conventional image would have looked like this and very blurred, but now you can make a pristine image, again, which looks just like the images when the subject was not moving. So that, again, is part of our longer-term integration into scanners that will really help patients who are struggling with the noise, struggling to lie still. And if you've made all this technology work, then take it into the womb. So you can go from womb to tomb, as my American colleagues say. So now you're able to do MRI in utero using silent imaging, which is also motion insensitive. So this is Joe Haenel, an incredible physicist, who was the man behind the phrase FLAIR. If anybody's ever heard the term FLAIR imaging, Joe came up with that and many other technologies. And Joe leads a group at St. Thomas's Hospital, near to the Houses of Parliament, that is routinely doing in utero scanning every day. They have a 0.5 Tesla machine dedicated to doing this, primarily for looking at conditions like poor placental blood flow, fetal growth, diabetic mums, etc., but now being used more and more in research as well. So we've made scans that are silent and motions insensitive and simultaneous. Can we even make the scans functionally sensitive? Can we even make scans that are sensitive to brain activity when they're still silent? And again, I mentioned earlier, with Niku Damistani, one of our PhD students, developed this technology called Looping Star, so you can now make silent fMRI. And it's not bad, it's not as good as a conventional MRI, it's almost as sensitive, but it has all those other benefits that we mentioned earlier, particularly when you're thinking about doing functional MRI of the auditory system when you want to do work on startle reflex, or when a patient is hearing voices, for example, like auditory hallucinations. Now, this all becomes feasible inside the scanner when you have a silent fMRI technology. But I won't spend long on fMRI because many of you in the audience are doing the masters and you'll hear more about this tomorrow. And the person who will be shedding light on that is Vincent Jean-Pietre, who is also visiting from King's as well and champions so much of the fMRI that Ioannis was talking about earlier on. So again, functional MRI is a technology that allows you to look at brain activity without the need for chemicals, contrast agents, radiation, or anything like this. You literally rely on the blood oxygenation in the brain changing very subtly, and that is sensitive to the magnetic field. And I spend all my life looking above the neck, but I've been asked by so many colleagues that are working in pain or spinal cord injury or motor neuron disease, as was mentioned earlier, can we look below the neck? And this is where the collaboration with this university comes in. So we have a Dimitra sandwich here. So Dimitra with Yanis, Dave Lisco on the right, and friends and colleagues back home, Matt Howard, Olivia Kowalczyk, and many others, Sonia Medina, have worked on making fMRI happen robustly in the spine. And this is all very pioneering and very new. So you could be lying inside the machine and you could be doing a hand squeeze on a motor task, and now we're able to actually visualize the functional activity in the spine itself. So if we're thinking about novel treatments to repair the spine, look at the impact of multiple sclerosis, and as I said, motor neuron disease and others, and pain, I think this is going to be amazing, a huge innovation in years to come. I won't spend too long on it, but this really is one of those areas I thought would never work, but thank you for all the efforts that everyone here has put in. And more recently, not only have we looked at motor systems, but we're also even now able to look at pain in the spine, and be able to tell the difference between people are experiencing just pressure. So you put your thumb inside this little piston over here inside the scanner, and then we can visualize the brain activity in the spine itself. As through the spine, you're now able to visualize this. So this could be very exciting because there's a new generation of drugs for treating pain that have just been approved that work peripherally and not centrally. There's a huge issue, as you know, about the abuse of opiate drugs and dependency of analgesics in North America. So we were desperate to develop novel pain treatments that don't involve the drug crossing into the brain. So this type of technology will help us to visualize this for the first time. But for my last 10 minutes, I'm going to focus on the area that I've been most passionate about over the last few years. I said in that earlier slide, let's try and make MRI portable. I thought this was crazy. This was never going to work. But in the last few years, the first portable MRI machines have appeared on the market. And this is no small thanks to another amazing, very generous philanthropist, Bill Gates, who had a grand challenge in 2019 in Ethiopia that I attended, and we pitched the idea of such a system that could be more accessible and affordable to one and all. As we know, a conventional MRI machine might cost you several $1 million or euros. It involves a very sophisticated room, lots of helium, liquid nitrogen, and a very elaborate sighting. And it takes many years to install these. Whereas the idea we had was to have a portable system that was 1/10 of the weight, could be wheeled around, no cryogens, could be plugged into the wall. And because we were in Ethiopia pitching for this, I said to Bill, imagine just after you've had that fantastic coffee, take the plug out of the wall, plug this in, and we should be able to use it to do MRI. I shouldn't have shown an iPhone and an iPad to someone who was the inventor of Microsoft. But anyway, nonetheless, it works on any tablet device. You can send your images to the phone, and you make use of the cloud. And I'll say a bit more about that in a minute. Now, the magnetic field strength is really low. Much, much lower than we're used to. So you're having to compromise. There's no free lunch. The images are not as clean and clear, but they might be good enough. So in about 7 or 8 minutes, we can create an image which is 1.5 millimeter by 1.5 millimeter by 1.5 millimeter voxel size, which is only a little bit bigger than a 1 by 1 by 1 that you would get on a conventional MRI machine. And the image quality and the correlation of volumes for the low field to the 3 Tesla are really good. So there's the prospect of using this beyond research in the years to come. So if you are someone who's suffering from multiple sclerosis and needs regular scans to see if you have new lesions, new plaques, is the medication working, then getting regular access to an expensive high-field machine might not be easy. But if as well, almost as well, on a low field versus the high field, maybe it's good enough. So if your metric of value is outcome over cost, and you have the same outcome when it comes to diagnosis or monitoring response to treatment, if the cost of this machine is 10% of the price, and you have the same outcome, then the value is 10 times as much. So that's a mindset to think about in the future when making such technology scalable and accessible. But the reason I got the funding from the Gates Foundation to get going in this whole area of portable MRI was to work on something we call Unity. And Unity stands for Ultra Low Field Neuroimaging in the Young. And the idea was to bring this technology to many geographies that have never had access to MRI before for any of their needs. So the mantra for the Gates Foundation is to ensure that we make scale that address global health problems. And I believe that Unity will sit in that intersection on the Venn diagram between all three of those. So Bill and the Gates Foundation are passionate about not only ensuring that children in lower middle income countries survive, but they also thrive in life. And it's time to move away from the meter ruler for measuring development to something more sophisticated. So I was involved in helping to write a WHO document just 2 years ago about what we should be doing for the next decade. And basically, the line that Laurel from Northeastern coined, which I think sums up the whole of the document, saves you having to read it, is to say, If we want to assess brain health and development, we've got to be measuring the brain, not some proxy such as a meter ruler. So that's why we developed the hyperfine scanner for this purpose. Because as we know, that brain changes dramatically during the first 1,000 days of life. And measuring head circumference, measuring height, measuring the width of your arm is not enough and of itself. So we started to roll these machines out. And the first machine went to Malawi, arrived, taken out of the box, wheeled down the corridor, and they were scanning their first subject the same day. Can you imagine that? Anybody that's involved in putting in infrastructure for imaging. And this was a patient with cerebral malaria, and being able to monitor and diagnose and treat that subject on the same day as the scanner arrived. But then and then we had the pandemic, and we had everyone on lockdown, so we weren't able to roll out these systems across the world. So what we did, well, at least we rolled them out, but we couldn't get to the sites to help to install and train. So we developed a whole series of training videos which work well for everyone whose mother tongue is not English, to how to uncrate, how to move, how to scan a baby, how to clean and quality control and all these things. And now these are being used routinely to help train people in these jurisdictions that may have never had MRI before. And to build on Yanis's previous picture he showed of the Unity network, this is going from strength to strength. There are now almost 50 systems distributed across the world. Most are in the clinical areas of sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia, in Bangladesh, Pakistan and India. We have a system that's now running in Santiago in Chile, one on its way to Guatemala. And we have, alongside all of these clinical sites that are focused on the questions that we're trying to answer with our scanner, we have centers of excellence that have been long-standing MRI expertise based in Europe and North America that help and complement the work that's going on in each of these regions. So, for example, if we're interested in making a scan that is sensitive to myelin, so like that multiple sclerosis scan, so we have a group at University of British Columbia, up there, that is optimizing the imaging for multiple sclerosis and seeing demyelination. And then that expertise is now being shared in South Africa and in Bangladesh to look at myelination in early brain development. So those two complement each other. The groups in Australia and other areas in pink are helping to do the image analysis and modeling, and we're building the first and the first Botswana brain scans and the first brain scans from the Congo next year, the first brain scans from many of these different jurisdictions, and so we'll be learning a lot. So we're using cloud technology to do all this. So you collect the scan, it's piped to the cloud, and then we have an amazing fellow in our department, Niall, Irish guy called Niall Burke, who is building these gears, taking many of the existing tools for image analysis, building them into pipelines so that we can reconstruct the images, extract the brain, strip the skull, segment, analyze, quantify, and produce outputs that can then be fed back to the non-expert. Of course, we have the radiology department that can be feeding and looking at this at the same time, but we're building all these different gears that allows us to answer whatever questions that we're developing. So because we are all on the same hardware, same software, and we're training the groups to work in the same way, everyone is then standardizing what we do. We had 5 sites in Ghana, in Uganda, Malawi, and South Africa that had scanned 1,000 children in the first 500 days of life, and we were able to build a generic growth curve for those kids in Africa. So we can start to look at the impact of malnutrition, infection, inflammation, birth complications such as HIE, hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy, and combinations thereof. But my last 2 slides, this is just a little bit of a preview for those attending the Masters tomorrow, because Jess is going to be speaking. Jess is focused on using the Unity network to answer the question, what happens to the baby brains who are born to mums who are anemic? And as you can see, large areas of Southeast Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa are anemic. And the bottom line is that you're born with a much smaller corpus callosum and a caudate than normal. And we've now monitored those kids over several years, and despite our best attempts and efforts, we are not recovering that. So we know that we need to be giving the mums during pregnancy iron. So those trials are ongoing in Bangladesh and in Malawi, because we don't know exactly how much iron and when to give it to have the optimum output for the baby. That could be complemented by HIV and other types of infection and inflammation, and it's completely exacerbated by preterm birth. In the first few weeks and months of life, you struggle to uptake iron as a baby, and you have to rely on the iron store in your body. So the more we can do, and a rather simple intervention like this, and use quantitative approaches, I think could have a huge impact on global health. You could repeat the same story for low birth weight, malnourished mothers in Uganda, that following breastfeeding, if the child is still hungry, we now have formula milk that we then give to supplement the diet, and that formula has precursors of myelin, things like sphingomyelin and choline. Is that going to help? In other jurisdictions in India, we know that azithromycin during pregnancy seems to dramatically reduce infection and the number of miscarriages and early term. And again, we need to know the impact of all these different interventions that we're trying. So not only are we looking at the mother's brains, but also the baby brains, and Jess, as I say, she can talk more about this tomorrow. So for my last slide, I thought I'd never be seeing this, but again, this is the power of a network of groups around the world, all under humanitarian license. So the idea is that nobody patents and tries to make a buck out of doing this. We're all doing this for the greater good of society. And the group in Cardiff, led by Derek Jones, has a PhD student called James, who now has diffusion tract imaging, DTI, working on this ultra-low field scanner, despite the hardware constraints and the limitations of that system. And in UBC in Vancouver, we have another amazing PhD student, Shada, who's working on magnetization transfer. This is another type of MRI that allows you to see the myelin. So you can even combine the tractography and the myelin information to understand more about development, because we know that this system and these networks and these areas are impacted by things like anemia. So that's one example. I could have given many of where this technology is going, and that sort of family that Yannis was talking about, that was just at the CNS, is hopefully becoming more of a global family, and we're looking forward to you joining in that ride. So thank you so much for your time and listening, and all I can say is ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ. Thank you.
Με την απόψινή τελετή αναγνωρίζεται η εξαιρετική συνεισφορά του καθηγητή William στην επιστήμη, εδραιώνοντας τους δεσμούς του Πανεπιστημίου Θεσσαλίας με το διεθνή επιστημονικό κόσμο. Σας ευχαριστούμε θερμά για την ξεχωριστή παρουσία σας, που προσέδωσε ιδιαίτερο κύρος στη σημερινή εκδήλωση, και ευχόμαστε το έργο του τιμόμενου να συνεχίσει να μας εμπνέει και να φωτίζει το δρόμο μας. Ιδιαίτερες ευχαριστίες απευθύνουμε στον Αντιπρίτανη του Πανεπιστημίου Θεσσαλίας, καθηγητή Ιωάννη Στεφανίδη, τον Αντιπρόεδρο του Τμήματος Ιατρικής, καθηγητή Αριστίδη Ζιμπή, καθώς και στον καθηγητή Ιατρική Φυσικής, κύριο Χρυσοβαλάντη Ιωάννη Τσούγκο, για την καθοριστική και σημαντική του συμβολή στην επιτυχία της εκδήλωσης. Καλό σας βράδυ.